Hello and welcome to this section of the course where we start to look at working with user forms. Now, user forms are a superb interactive element of using Excel VBA. We can create our own tailor-made kind of dialog boxes or message boxes, any kind of interactive form element like this. So we can easily interact with the user, ask them questions, display data in a very meaningful and visual way. Now, in this first video, we're going to look at how we can create one, look at working with form controls such as combo boxes and check boxes and buttons, look at naming conventions for them, and then also some of the properties associated with them. And in the later videos, we're going to look at some of the coding elements of actually working with them controls, validating the data, and processing the data that was captured. Now, our example here is that we've got a list of expenses. We want a form to be used to capture this data, a nice meaningful way that people can enter it. That is our plan. So, we've got some standard data at the moment. This is what we want to capture. We're going to switch straight to our user form, our VBA environment. So, Alt and F11. So we're in that VBA environment, and we will go to our Insert menu. Make sure that you're in the project that you need on the left there, and a user form. So we're going to insert a user form. Here it is. I'm just going to resize the user form, make it a little bit larger than what it is, maybe about that. We can always work with that again at a later date. We see we get this toolbox on the left as well. So this is where we're going to be getting our form controls from. I'm going to drag it over to the right hand side. I always prefer it over there so it's not obscuring the Project Explorer and the Properties window on the left. Well, it wasn't really obscuring the Properties window, to be fair, was it? But I like it on the right anyhow. But we can shimmy that wherever we want. Find a bit of space on your machine and how large your screen is. Now, something we haven't really done much with on this course so far is this Properties window on the bottom left. Now, if you do not see a Properties window there, let me close mine down. If you do not see it, we can go to our View menu and our Properties window. Something that I know we did mention really early in the course, one of our first videos, but worth a little refresher there. View Properties window, and apparently F4. Here it is. Now we're going to start working with that a lot more, mainly to name the controls as we bring them in, but we'll also explore some of the other properties involved. The first thing we're going to do with this user form is we're going to deal with a couple of the naming conventions here, which we're going to do for every single form. And the first thing is to name it. So this new user form is currently called user form 1. Bear in mind that we are going to have to refer to the name of this form in this example, but that control, throughout our coding. So we need a nice meaningful name that we can easily call off the top of our head and so on. So I'm going to call it FRM, and then I'm going to proceed with the name of the form without spaces. What is this doing? It's doing expenses. I'm going to call it expenses. FRM expenses. Bring the capital E in to change the name there. Now, the FRM in front stands for form. You probably guessed that. And it's something that we do not need to do. You don't need that in there. You can name it however you wish. Similar to how we name macros and name variables. However, this is known as Hungarian notation, would you believe? And it's a fairly universal language that we can use when naming controls. Now, some people go through this when they name variables and stuff as well. As you've seen, for me personally, I don't use it in the variable when assigning names to variables, but I do with form controls. So that when we need to reference a form control within our VBA code, we know it will be like FRM and a form name. or we'll come to them, but CMD for a button, or TXD for a text control. It's easy for us to remember once you get going with this stuff. We recognise it in other people's coding, but it also helps differentiate different controls that may have the same name. You know, I may have more than one control called first name or something like this. So it's easier for us to differentiate between them. Okay, so very, very common thing to do, which you don't have to do, but you're probably going to see a lot out there in people's VBA procedures, and I'm going to use right now. Now, caption, a little bit further down, we've got caption. And this is what the user will see. This is that name that appears along the title bar of the form. So I'm going to call it expenses form. Sorry, my apologies. Expenses form. So we have provided a name, the name that we will have to reference when writing our VBA code, but also the caption, which is just what the user sees. Right, let's get stuck in with putting some controls on then. So the first bit of information we are capturing is the name of the person. So I'm going to bring in a text box control, the lowercase ab on the toolbox there. I'm going to give it a click, and I'm going to click, or maybe click and drag, to roughly draw a kind of text box on there, which I'm then going to immediately proceed to naming. No caption on this one, but I will name it. So I'm going to name this one TXT, says that Hungarian notation, and then I'm going to call it first name, because that's what it's going to capture. I'll click away to confirm that. I'll grab a label this time, the large A, so I can draw this roughly to the left. I may have to think about resizing these. I'm going to immediately name again. Good practice to immediately go and name them so that you don't omit that and forget. Very easy to do, and in mid-coding you'll try and reference it, TXT first name, and you realise it's still called, you know, text box 3 or whatever. Very easy to do. So LBL first name, immediately there I've given two controls the same name, but because of that prefix, LBL for label, TXT for text box, I can easily differentiate them. Now I should mention, you can find a list of these naming conventions. If you just Google this stuff, you can find a list easily enough. Typically it's just the first three letters minus the vowels in most cases. There are some exceptions to that rule, but in most cases, so LBL, classic example of that, TXT, you know, first three letters minus the vowels. Okay, caption. Definitely the caption on this one. This is why we are even bringing in the label. It's not going to solve any other purpose apart from this. It's just going to say first name, so that anybody completing this form knows what they've got to do. Right, let's bring in another one, another text box. You don't have to do it in this order, but for some reason I am. Let's name that TXT last name, and go and get a label. Let's quickly shoot past this because we've got more stuff to get through on this video. Name it LBL last name. Caption it last name. Right, flying now. Okay, next up, next form control. We're going to be bringing in the combo box. So what we want is we need a drop down list or a combo box. And the user's going to use this to select what department they are from. So I'm going to bring in this combo box to start with, which is this one on the end of the first row. If your toolbox looks the same as mine, I'm going to give that a click. And I'm going to draw in this combo box. I'm going to try and make it the same size, but we'll look at that in a little bit. And I'm going to go and name it. So this one's going to be CBO. So I said there are some exceptions to that first three letters minus vowels. That's quite an easy way of referencing what they typically are. So this one's not that. It's a CBO. And then its name, which is going to be department. And I'm going to go and get a label control for that. So so that people know what that combo box means. Which, you guessed it, LBL department, and will be the caption of department. Now for this combo box, we're going to need to provide it with the items to appear in the list. Now there are different ways of doing that. You may see some people do it on when the form is initialized, creating it kind of on the fly and stuff. But the easiest way, and what we're going to do here, is on our spreadsheet. I have a sheet called lists, and within there I have a very small list, and I've associated a name departments with that. So I've got a range name, a defined name for departments, to reference them free on a different sheet. And I want to reference that within my VBA code to tell it to show them as the items in this list. So if I select my combo box, notice that in the properties window they display the control or part of the form that is currently selected. So I can also select items from this list if you prefer, as opposed to selecting them in the list. And what am I going to go for here? I'm going to go for row source. There's a property called row source, and in there I'm going to type equals department I think. Was it equals departments? Let's click away from that. Let's have a quick check, shall we? I can't remember if I put it in a plural form or not. It's in a plural form. It's departments, and I think that's in there. Equals departments. That should be working fine. Now, at any point while we're creating our form, you can check this out. So if you wanted to test that, I could make sure I've got my form selected and go for your standard kind of run sub user form button at the top. So I can ask it to run this code or run that form, and it will pop up. So at the moment, that's what it looks like. Notice the first name box is already selected, my cursor flashing. I can click in any box, and indeed I've got a combo box with the 3 items from that range name in there. So this is what it looks like at the moment. I can just close that down and return back to the code. So just use briefly there to check that it is functioning, the way that we wish. Okay, next control, we need to specify the date that this expense was captured, and we are going for the date picker for this. Now if I scroll down my toolbox, I have this date picker. Now this is something sorry, that has changed a little bit over the versions of Excel. So you might have to be a little bit careful with this on your version. But it's available to me to create a lovely little calendar picker, so somebody can choose the date easily as opposed to write it in. A lot easier than what you may have to do on an Excel spreadsheet. Now one of the reasons that is displayed on mine is because we can, or indeed I could right mouse click anywhere on this toolbox and go for additional controls. That opens up this dialog box where you can choose additional controls to display, all depending on the version of Excel that you have and whatever's been installed. And on mine I have it chosen to show the dates picker, which I'm trying to remember where that is in this list. I must have gone past it. There it is. The Microsoft Date and Time Picker Control number 6. Notice all these are in Forms 2 checkbox. So we can choose what items are displayed here. I saw Ref Edit mentioned there, which is another good one. The Ref Edit one is the one that allows you, there it is, Ref Edit, the one that allows you to select a range in a spreadsheet. So when you're in, trying to think of a dialog box that uses it quickly, the advanced filter. You've used the advanced filter maybe, and you're in there. We might as well just think about creating a chart really, or creating a pivot table. You get the Ref Edit control in there, so you can select the range quickly on the fly if you haven't selected it prior to the wizard or the dialog box, depending on what version you're using. Okay, so that's a great control. We've got the Microsoft Date Time Picker control number 6 enabled by checking that, so you may need to do the same to get it enabled on yours. You may have a slightly different version, and that is worth mentioning as well. This is a bit more volatile, this control. You may need to get to it first, or not be able to have it at all. But it is an example of another control that I have at my disposal. I'm going to click it, and then click it onto my form as well. And we can always look at resizing this and stuff afterwards, like we do the other controls. And most importantly, look at giving it a name, which is going to be DTP date. And then we'll need a label for it. Let's scroll back up. Let's get a label in there. Brilliant, which is going to be a name of LBL, date, and a caption of date. Okay, I'm just going to select that date time picker for a moment. Now, for all these controls so far, as well as doing the name and the caption, and for the combo box we saw the row source, there are a lot of other options in there. Date time picker will have some unique ones, namely these max and min dates. Now, I wasn't planning on changing them for now in this example, but they do exactly what they say they're going to do. A huge range of dates there. You could be more specific to cut down exactly what date can be selected. That is not a bad idea. There's also a values box at the bottom here, which shows the default value when somebody first opens this form. So that's got what is currently today's date in there at the moment, but that will stay fixed. So whenever I open this form from now on, it's going to display the 31st of March 2014, which is not what I'm going to want, but I'm going to come back to that. We're going to look at changing that in our code rather than for now. But there's lots of other properties in there that I'm not going to bore ourselves with going through loads of these for now. But you know, lots of stuff for fonts and background colours and all kinds of stuff, width and height and position, and there are some good bits in there. Okay, I'm going to come out of that. Actually deciding that I'm going to make my form a little bit wider. I'm going to put the other controls to the right, I think. Let's make it a bit smaller. I'm going for a checkbox next. I'm going to have a checkbox control. I'm going to put about there. And this checkbox control will be named CHK. Now, what is the first expense on our form? Right, it's car, train, taxi, overnight stay. I want to capture this information. So I'm going to give this first one CHK car. Checkbox car. Caption car. And what I want to do is we've got our checkbox, and we've just been talking about different properties. Probably worth mentioning that a popular one for checkboxes is value again. So currently set to false. So when people first open this dialog box, that will be not checked, basically, which is the way I want it. But we can choose whether we want it checked by default or not. In some cases you may do, and in some cases you won't. In this case I'm not. And what I'm going to do is I'm then going to go and insert a text box control, which I'm going to name TXT car. So now we really are seeing some duplication on control names. I've got CHK car and TXT car. But I know that one is the checkbox associated with it, and the other one is the text box, sorry. Now I've got this text box still selected. What I wanted to see as another property here is I was going to scroll down and demonstrate the use of the visible property. So the visibility is currently set to true. What I want to do is I want to display the 4 checkboxes, and only when somebody checks that box, if they do, the text box will appear. And this text box is going to be for them to type the value in. So they can say, yes, I did travel by train, and the expense was £55. Yes, I did need an overnight stay, and so on. But a text box will not display if they haven't checked it. So I just want to use this as a demonstration of another property down there. So we can't go through a huge amount, but maybe a lot of them will kind of read quite nicely anyway, and you've got an idea of what they do from your experience of using forms on the web or in Excel and that. Yes, but a good example, very useful property, shows something a little bit extra that we can look at working with in our code as well. So I'm going to set that visibility to false. Do not display. So if I played my form now, if I select my form and I run it, this is what it looks like. So I've got a checkbox for car, but I do not see the text box. Now we're going to have to add this into our code, but when we check the box, that will appear. There's today's date, by the way, in the date picker. And if I gave that a click, that's your date picker. So really coming to the fore now. This begins to look the business. I've now got to quickly add in the other 3, so I'm going to do that in a relative speed, so that we can shoot through to anything else that's next. I forgot what's next. Train, I think. Train. Shoot through the amount of repetition on this video. Let's reduce that. I need a text box. I'm going to rename that TXT train. Then another checkbox, which is going to be CHK taxi. The caption will be taxi. Text box. I need a text box. In it goes. Oh, TXT taxi. This is fun. Right, I just realised I forgot the visibility property or attribute on the other one. Visibility false. Let's get to that train. Visibility false. One more to go. Checkbox. CHK overnight. Caption will be overnight. And then let's reduce that a little bit. Text box. Whoops. Okay, it's in there. Didn't mean to drag them, but TXT overnight. Oh, visibility false. Okay. So getting through some of it there. Did that by double clicking, by the way, if you're wondering. Now, as you can see me doing here, I mean, once them controls are in, they've all been named. We've dealt with some of the properties associated with them. So we're going to need to tidy this up on these at the moment is we're going to need to arrange them. So clearly this is not the same size and I may want it to be. And also these need to be in alignment and stuff. So I'm not going to spend the whole video doing this perfectly. I'll perfect it outside the video ready for the next video. Although you should have your own by then anyway. But just to demonstrate some techniques, you know, when it comes to the width situation, by selecting a box you do have the information in here as to its kind of height and width, so we can work with the actual measurements. There's the height there, 18, so we can deal with these. There's width 66. So if I've got the width of one of the other boxes, then I could mix and match. The width is 84, come to this one, specify the width of 84. Now that's one way I can do it. I now know that that is the exact same width as the taxi one. Now I could have copied and pasted the taxi text box and then just renamed it overnight. There are other approaches. Some of these you might be thinking right now, oh well I would do it like this. That's great, go for that. But we need to make sure it's the same height and width. Something else, which I might drag that a little bit to the left for, is I could click and drag to select the controls. Now notice when doing the area select that as long as it touches a box, it will select it. Now that's a little bit different to if you've used things like Visio, where you have to incorporate them all for them to be included. But here, as long as it touches it, that's enough. So I'm going to have to be a bit more precise with my selection there, so you don't get them text boxes, only the check boxes. Format menu, and we have our align options. So I can ask it to align the lefts, and they all meet up quite nicely. I might drag them a little bit to the right. Yeah, perfect. And they are now in line with each other. I could select these text boxes only. Say, oh, let's align these. Let's align their lefts. Ones I made sure they're exact same width. And here it's beginning to come together. You know, I might want to align these all up together. Let's align you guys. Let's get you, trying to get that selection a bit better. There we go. And can we align the tops of you, so I know that you're all the same, and so on and so forth. Now we can also do things like select controls, and another thing you may have done in, probably more likely in the likes of PowerPoint or Visio, these kind of techniques, but you could do them anywhere. Things like vertical spacing. So make sure each of the controls is the exact same width between each one. So I can say, can you make the spacing equal? I don't think they moved there, so it must have been pretty equal already. So there's a lot of techniques that we can use from the format menu there, or by measurements or other ways, of making sure that these controls are perfectly in line with each other, distributed equally, and your form is going to look the business. Okay, now we need 2 more controls on here. I need 2 buttons, which we're going to add most of the code into in the next few videos. I will need a command button, this 3rd row 2nd button, which I'm going to draw in to be about that size. And its name will be CMD OK. This will be the OK button. Its caption will be OK. And then on what we just spoke about, I'm going to copy and paste that button. Gives me another button the exact same size. Drag it next door. It's quite it's quite easy to align controls with each other, because they're magnetised to the grid in the background here. So you may find you can align them by hand and not so much from that format menu if you can get away with it. Caption cancel. So it's your cancel button. Its name is CMD cancel. I've got 2 buttons. I'm going to select them both and move them a little bit further to the right to align them with them boxes above, using the grid to align them there. I think it's okay. If you weren't too sure, we can select all of these. I have to select that and also select all of these to get this done, and look at aligning their rights. And I don't think that moves. I think it was okay, but you know, we'd spend some time doing that properly before it got done. Okay, I think the last thing to mention on our design, or our creation of this form, which we probably don't need to change because of the way it was set up. Now where is it? I think it's the view menu. We're going for the tab order. Now if you've ever filled in a form before, and what am I asking? Of course you did. You would have filled one in to purchase this course. But the tab order is when you're pressing your tab key, it's the order that each control gets its focus. You know, selecting each control. Now because of the order that this was created, it's probably okay already. But this is where we can go to change this. So when somebody's tabbing through the form, it goes from first name to last name to department to date to car, train, taxi, overnight. OK, cancel. Which is the exact order I want. But we can select controls in here and change this tab order. So if it wasn't quite right, especially when you change this in the future, if it goes from first name to last name to train, back to department, to date, back to car, and this kind of stuff, and jumps to overnight, then we need to deal with that so that somebody can nice and user friendly when somebody's completing it. You can just tab through the fields, nice and easy, very fast. It's a data entry job, but nobody likes data entry here. Just quickly plough through and get these expenses done, rather than to click with your mouse or anything like this. So that's our tab order. Very, very useful. We want to make sure that's set up correctly, which at the moment it is. So I'll click on my form one last time and run it with F5 or that button. When I press my tab key, it's moving through the forms in the order that we want. So that is that. We have ourselves a form. In the next videos, we're going to have to start adding some VBA code to this now. We need the text box to appear when we check that box. We need the date field to pop up as date. We need a way of opening the form. I mean, at the moment, we can't even get it open without going through the VBA environment. And one of the most important thing of all, when we hit that OK button, we're going to need it to put information in this list. And we need to validate for invalid or wrong information. So that's all coming in the coming videos. This was just to create one. I'm aware it's not the most riveting of videos and jobs, although some people enjoy it. But it's important that obviously we get this looking good, and we assign some properties to make it function correctly, and maybe even format it correctly to keep it in line with our company's brand and colour scheme. Hello and welcome to this lesson where we are going to start to look at how we can open and close our user form that we have created. So I have this spreadsheet where I need to record the expenses, and we've got this user form that is going to achieve that for us. But before we can fill in the form, we need a way of opening it, and then equally a way of closing it down. Now let's kick off with a kind of opening procedure. So let's get into our VBA environment. Let's get to the Visual Basic Editor, and I'm going to insert a module because we're going to have to write this as a normal sub procedure, and we're going to assign this to a button on the worksheet. So insert a module. We're going to create a sub procedure which I'll call add expenses, and it's simply going to have one line to open up the user form. Now if I refer to the user form, FRM expenses, I can see it mentioned on the left there, FRM expenses, dot, and here are a load of properties and methods associated with that user form. Now we're going to go for the one called show. So we have a method called show that does exactly what it says it's going to do. It's going to display your user form. So it will load the form, initialize it, and display the form. As you can see, there are a lot of other different properties and methods in here to achieve various jobs that may come in handy at other times for you. We're going to go straight for this show. Where'd it go? Here it is. And that is that. We need to create that button on the worksheet, but that is just a little sub procedure that's job is to display our user form. So let's, while the iron is hot, get back to our spreadsheet, and I'm going to insert a button, which I'm shooting through relatively quickly here because we have done this kind of stuff before. In goes a button. I'm going to assign it to the add expenses sub procedure, and I'll label my button add expense. Let's make that bold, that text. Who likes a nice bold text? And that will do us for now. So this button, when clicked, will open the user form. Now here is the date that we mentioned in our previous video. This date is actually yesterday's date. I'm recording this video on a different date. And I mentioned this in the previous video that that's not always going to display today's date. That's just kind of displaying the date that it was created on. Now we need that to always show today's date. That's what I want. You know, somebody can choose a date, any date, but I like that to show today by default, with the assumption that maybe 50% of the time people putting this expense in, it normally has happened today. So let's close that form down for now, and let's go back into our Visual Basic editor. And we can put this kind of information in using the properties window, like we had a look at some of the properties in that previous video for this DTP picker, this date picker. But what we're going to do is we're going to code it in, because it gives us an opportunity to look at some of the user form events. So I'm going to double click anywhere on this user form to take me into a relevant code window. As we know that we can double click on any sheet or workbook or module to see their code window. I can also double click on the form, and that will give me the event user form click. What do you want to do if somebody clicks on the user form? That is its default event. But over to our right here, we have a drop down list of other events that we can use. So this gets us going with events, working with user forms, and all of the different controls on a form and the form itself will have a list of events associated with them. So here are some of the events for a user form. And the one I was going for, let's have a little scroll through the list actually first. Here's some of the stuff. But the one I was going for is I'm going for initialize. So as a form opens, one of the processes it goes through is its initialization. And it's a good place where you can add code that kind of needs to run at startup, if you will, when the form opens. So some people use this to clear fields, set default values, build combo box lists on the fly, whereas we've referenced the range name on our sheet, and that kind of stuff. We're going to use it to set the default value of our date picker as the example of this use. So I'm going to say DTP date, because that is the name of the date picker. If you forget this name by any point, just pop back to our form by double clicking on it, select the control, and have a look in the properties window there, DTP date. Just double click on there. Or I guess you could click this drop down list up here, which will drop down a list of objects. We can see DTP date up there as well. Okay, DTP date dot value. The value of that control equals, and I'm going to write date. Now, if memory serves me, earlier on in this course we used that inbuilt function to write today's date onto a worksheet. So it's not the first time we've used it. But that inbuilt function for date will assign whatever today's date is from your computer's clock to that form control, the date picker. And it will do this at the user form's initialization. Now this sub procedure here I can just delete. It's not doing any harm, quite happily leave it there, but it's an erroneous event. I don't need that. That was a default event for the form and I've opted for something else, so I'm going to skip past that. And the last thing we're going to look at in this video is closing down the form. Now you've already seen me do that using the X in the top right hand corner of the form. But I'm now going to look at popping to that form and assigning this to the cancel button as well. That's what the cancel button is there for. So I'm going to double click on the cancel button. So I then take into the default event for that form control. So CMD cancel, click is the default event. Once again, a list of different events appearing on the right there, what if they double click it, what if they mouse over it, and so on and so forth. As you can imagine, clicking it is kind of the event for a button, And that's what we're going for here as well. And we're going to write 2 simple words to close down this user form. We're going to write unload and then me, which is quite cute, don't you think? But because this button, because we're closing down the form that the button resides on, we can reference it with the simple word of me. We don't have to say unload FRM expenses or anything like that. FRM expenses dot this. We can simply refer to it as me because it is the kind of parent control, if you will. The button belongs on that form. It is closing down its form, not a different control of some sort. So unload me, that would ensure that when this form is opened, let's give that a run for a spreadsheet for a more real-time environment. Somebody clicks a button, the form opens, and today's date is displayed in the form control. Somebody can then click this cancel button if they don't need it anymore, and it unloads the form. So there we've got opening and closing the form, and also a brief look at the user form's initialization or initialize event, which is a popular event for loading up default values and building controls and this kind of stuff as the form kind of opens on the fly, if you will. Okay, in the next video we're going to have a look. I'm sure what you're dying to get going is the actual functionality of the form. We need to program this OK button to do its job, and we need to be able to get these text boxes to appear when we check the relevant box. Hello and welcome to this lesson where we're going to start to add the functionality to our user form. So most of this functionality being driven by the OK button to actually add the expense. But before we get to the OK button, we want to program these text boxes to appear when somebody checks this box. So as a quick refresher, so I don't know if you're watching these videos days apart or if you saw it 2 minutes ago, but if I hit my run button to display this form, these text boxes are not displayed. We want to be able to check a box and a box appears. Uncheck it, because we made a mistake when we ticked it, it disappears. We need this functionality. So I'm going to double click somewhere in my user form to get into this kind of module, this code module, and along the top, where in the first drop down list we have a list of objects, I'm going to search for the CHK controls, checkboxes. I'm going to start off with car because it's logical, it's the first one in that list on the form. I'm going to select it. So it'll bring up the default event, which is to click on CHK car. Now I was going to move to the events on the right, because I was actually going for a change event. I believe the click event is activated by mouse click. I'm not 100% whether that functions when people use the space bar or stuff to click it. So I'm opting for change, if that changes its value as opposed to when it is clicked. But essentially, once again, there are lots of different events available in that list which are a trigger for our code. I'm opting for the change event. I can now delete this click event, not that it's doing any harm, but it is redundant. And I'm going to put in some code to display the text box. So naturally there's a decision to be made here. If it is checked, then make it visible. If it is not, then don't. So we're going to put in an if then else statement. If CHK car equals true, so if it is checked, then let's put that end if in. Good practice in case we forget. TXT car, so the text box associated with that control, dot visible. There's a property called visible, and it's good that it came up in that list because I've made a typo. Dot visible equals true. Then please make it visible. If the checkbox is checked, make the text box visible. Else, make it invisible. TXT car dot visible equals false. So now we're going to need to repeat these for the other controls, but a simple little if statement. So when the checkbox is changed, check its value. If it's true, then make it visible. If it's not, then don't. So I'm just going to try and do this as quick as I can. I'm going to take a copy of that little chunk, that if statement. Got to pop up to the objects and choose the next one. Should we CHK train? Doesn't really matter what order these go in, but try to put them in the order that they are in the form, because to me that's quite logical for a user reading this code, that it appears in that order. Let's paste that in. I shouldn't really worry too much about these spaces, but CHK train and TXT train and TXT train. Okay, next up, apologies for this boring bit, we'll shoot through these, get them all in there, so that we can move on to the OK buttons. Let's get rid of that tick, let's paste in our code, and we've got car to taxi, and car to taxi. I must have a caps lock on there. Taxi, and one more. Then we've just got the overnight to do. So I'm just going to pop in here and choose overnight. Overnight. Change that to a change event. Paste in the stuff. Here we go, and change it to overnight. 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 And then overnight. Okay, let's get rid of that. So, they are them done. Let's have a look. Let's pop back to our form. I'm going to run that, and we'll see what it does. So I'm going to check a box for train, for example. Text box appears. Check it again. Disappears. Overnight. Oh, important stuff. I've changed the wrong thing. Okay, let's close that down. Always test your work. Mistakes happen, especially moments like that where you find yourself just repeating the same thing and your mind is drifting because it's so blatantly obvious that you're not even concentrating so much. You have to love the VBA debugging tools. Right, visible, love it. Reset that, let's give that a go. Play it. Overnight. Oh, hello. Taxi and car. Don't know why I tested in that order, but they seem to be functioning lovely. So that leaves us with this OK button. I'm going to give that a double click to immediately go into the events for the OK button, similar to what we did cancel. So I can see down here now we've got a private sub OK click. Once again, events from this list, but we're going for the click event, so I'm happy. The order these appear, by the way, is not important. They're in like ascending order by their name, and that's why they appear in this order. But it's irrelevant. You know, the user form initialize happens before any of that stuff, despite it being at the bottom, because it begins with a U, essentially. Right, so this OK. We need to get to our sheets. We need to find the bottom of this list and capture what row the next vacant kind of row is. We're then going to use that to populate this information into these cells. So in our code, I'm going to declare a variable called row num. There are different ways of doing this kind of stuff, like finding an X empty row, and we've used a few different techniques throughout this course just to get a feel, really, the pros and cons of each one, how you like to establish yourself, or how a colleague may have done it as well. And then we need to find out where it is. So I'm going to say row num equals range A1 dot end. I'll have Excel down dot offset 1,0 dot row. I think that's it. So from range A1, go to the bottom of that list, or not go there, but look at the bottom of the list, one cell below the bottom, and capture what row number it is. Beautiful bit of code, incorporating some of the bits we've done throughout the day. So that's assigned to row num. So that sorry, I'm going to use the cells object to assign the information from our form to the cells of that row, the columns of that row. So I'm going to put cells row index is row num, that variable, comma 1, which is the first column, i.e. column A in this case, dot value equals, and this will be first name, so txt first name. Now I'm going to copy that line, and I'm going to paste it onto each one. How many controls have we got? I've got 8. We could put this in a funky little loop and stuff this to try and shorten this code, but it's such a simple little procedure, I don't really think that's necessary. But you may notice some people do that and have their reasons for it, to be honest. But if it works, it works. And it's however people are using it are happy. So I'm changing the column numbers. I don't need to change the controls. So this one is last name. This one is a combo box. It's CBO department. I can't remember if it's department or departments. Quick check. CBO department, yes. This one is the DTP control. Now, as a reminder, we can do things like control space, stuff to drop down these IntelliSense lists, which are, never a bad idea in these situations if you're trying to remember the name of like a property, a method, a control, and this kind of stuff to draw on. And I can see DTP date appear in this list as something that's available to me. So I'm going to double click that from there. Quick little reminder, control space for the IntelliSense list. These are text boxes. The first one, if I get the order right, is car, then train, then taxi, whoop, and then finally overnight. Let's just double check the spreadsheet. Car, train, taxi, overnight. Okay, I've got the order. Happy with that. So, let's have yes, I think I'm happy with that. Let's have a look at what we've got so far. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop back to here and click my add expense form. My button. So it appears, and I'll start to put in maybe a fictional information. I have Mickey Mouse. Department as marketing. Date, I'll leave us today. Car, yeah, there was like £24 on the car. And that would be that. Not to really stay overnight if it's only £24. I'm going to click OK. Now I can see in the background that information has appeared. Mickey Mouse marketing. Now, we can also see some problems though. I mean, first of all, you may have noticed that the user form did not close. So I clicked OK. It performed the relevant actions. It's found the last row. It's input the data as necessary. But it didn't close the form. And I'd like it to close when it finishes as well. So we're going to have to program that in. just like when you're in format cells, for example, and you do what it is that you do, and you click OK, and it will do that and close the form. We want that behaviour. You can also notice that it's not really happy at the moment, this spreadsheet. It's input the correct information, but it's come in a general format and not as a date. And that should be a date. Even worse is that this has come in as text. Because it was captured by a text box, it's been input to the form as text. So despite the cells being formatted in accounting format ready, it's coming as text. Excel's immediately warning us about that to convert to number, which we could do, but it is just not happy, is it? So for now I could choose to change these myself. So you are a date and you are a number. Thank you for letting me know this. Seems to have lost its accounting format because of that though. But we're going to need to program this stuff in. There's some glaring errors with our functionality as it stands. So, back to the editor we go. Back to the code for the OK button. First of all, let's close that form when it's done. So I can still see what we wrote up above for the cancel button. And we're going to replicate that at the bottom of this process. So we're going to unload me. The data's in there. We can now unload the form, which you can reference as me because the OK button is also on that form. And then we've got to start to think about the data type conversion. A really important concept of using user forms is to convert the data ready for the spreadsheet, as has been demonstrated. First of all, let's get this DTP date one done. And what we're going to use is a brilliant function called cdate. Now you can Google these and look them up, but you get the likes of cint, I think it is. I think it's cstring and cdouble, cboolean or cboo. We can look these up. We can Google these, bring them up within our editor. There's a whole bunch of them that work on converting data. Really, really useful, especially user forms. No surprise that cdate converts to a date. And they're asking here, bring the information in as a date. Tell me what the expression is. I'll convert it to a date. So we say, okay, capture the contents of DTP date and do your thing. Convert it to a date for me, please. Okay, so that will do that one. But for these text boxes, and we're going to need to do all of them, although an example demonstrated car going wrong, there are functions like cdouble, as mentioned, but we're opting for something different here. We're going for another brilliant function called val. Short for value there. That will convert any numbers it can see within a string. So it doesn't have to be a number on its own. It could say 10 High Street, and it would capture the 10 and bring it out for you. It would, accept a string, look for any values within it, and extract them and have them converted as a value. And as you can see, it tells us here as well that it's going to convert it to a double, which is brilliant for us because these are currency, so they are in decimal form. They are in double form. So this is exactly what we're after. And it's a simple function again. We just need to wrap this val function around each of these objects so that it can convert them for us. So two brilliant functions for converting data types, which is an essential skill of using VBA to be able to do that. Detecting data types, converting data types. So there's not more to investigate in that area, but these two especially should be able to get these jobs done for us. Only one thing left to do. Let's give that a test. Let's click our button put in Donald Duck. Oops, I can't fill in my own form correctly. Donald Duck. Let's say Donald Duck is from training, and he took a train for £53 and a taxi for £10, and he also stayed overnight for £102. Let's click OK, and there we go. So we have Donald Duck inserted. The date is coming correctly. The values are coming as currency. I can see these are blank here. I can fill them in with zeros. That would not happen anymore, as you can see, replicate with car there, because it's been that empty string has been converted to a value that's bringing across the value of 0. So from now on, this will be consistent. And yes, we have a functioning form. The last video of this section is going to look at some validation techniques. As I nearly did there and entered data incorrectly, we want to try and make sure, as best we can, that data is valid before we add it in there. Hello and welcome to this lesson where we're going to look at some validation techniques for our user form. Now, I don't want to drone on too much on validation. It's a very important concept, but in a way it's something that's been happening throughout this course, both in the section where we spoke about error handling in more detail, but also in the different areas that we have kind of tested the input to, like input boxes or message boxes or onto spreadsheets. And we've done quite a bit of this as we've gone. So a very important concept that we're going to have a quick look at, a couple of other examples that will differ a little bit to what we've done already on this course, but also want to hold back a bit, or this kind of topic could go on forever, and to a degree a user's got to make sure they're doing the right thing, to be honest, themselves. So the two things I do want to look at though is I want to perform a check when somebody clicks OK, and this example of a check is going to be to make sure that both the first name and the surname are not empty. I'm going to say, look, you can't input information without the person's first name and surname. They have to be populated or I will not allow entry. So I'm going to double click the OK button to take me straight into that part of the code. I'm going to put this after this information. You could quite happily go before, but I do like the variable assignment, declaration and assignment at the top there. And we're going to put an if statement in to test if txt first name equals an empty string. So when they click OK, have a look at that form control. Is it empty? Does txt first name equal nothing? Let's put my end if in. Now, if it does equal nothing, what do you want to do? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the user back into that control, which when dealing with controls like text boxes, we call setting focus. So there's a method called set focus that positions the cursor, like the insertion point, back into that control, so that when a user's taken back to the form, they are there. Just like you might have experienced when you fill in forms online that typically take you back to the control that you omitted or you mistyped, it was your email address or something. So txt first name dot set focus. Also similar to what you might come across on the web is that at times they will change the colour of the control. So it's a lot clearer as to where the mistake occurred. So I'm going to do that as well. I'm going to say txt first name dot, and once again this list of properties and methods, there is one for back colour. So the background colour of that form control. And I'm going to assign a colour to that. And I'll tell you what, if I do control space, does that bring up an IntelliList? It does. Here we go, this is better for us. Control space for the IntelliList. As I type RGB, a list of colours appear. So we can take our pick from these beautiful colours available to us. I was going to opt for red, but if you want a salmon colour or an orchid colour, go for it. I'm having red, classic colour for errors, danger, problems, this kind of stuff. And I'm going to exit the sub. So, yes, exit subroutine. Don't accept that. Put them back to the form control, change its colour, abort the macro. And I'm going to put as a, I guess I should put like an else if for it really. Could put separate if, but let's have an else if txt last name equals empty then, and I'll copy that into it. So we want a second test. There are different ways we could write this second test. I'm opting for the else if approach here. But in these latter parts of the course here, I'm just kind of thinking, you know, you might be thinking your own way. And that may be better, may be worse. To be honest, if it works, you can't really say anything's right or wrong. Things can be improved, but it's all about functionality. So, are they empty? If they are, then take the appropriate action. Only one at a time, don't change both of them. So test that one, do it and exit. So it's not going to change them both red. I can't set the focus of both of them either. Okay, so that is that. Let's jump across and get another validation technique done, and then we'll test them all out together. So I just wanted to do one more, and the other example I wanted to do is we have the 4 text boxes that are capturing values for the car, train, taxi and overnight expenditure. When the text boxes are changed, I want to do a check at that point, so not at the OK click, at the point of changing that control. I want to check it and make sure that there is a numeric value within there. It has to be numeric. So, let's have a look at that. Let's go to our drop down list at the top and choose the relevant control, which in this example, let's pick on car to start with. It's going to be txt car. So I want the text box, because that's where the value is. And it's immediately gone to this change event, which is the one that I wanted. But once again, recap, list of events that you can have a look at there that may match what you want. So I'm going to say txt car change. I want to know if, and I'm going to choose is numeric. Try to remember if we have done that on this course as yet. I can't remember, but probably. I do like this. And Excel probably deals with values, so it's very important. Check the expression as a boolean and see if it is true or false. Is it a number or is it not? I want to know if txt car dot value, yes, is numeric. If that equals false, so it is not numeric, then okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to display a message to the user. MSG box. Haven't done one in a little while. You have not entered a value. That's not a very good way of phrasing that, but my brain went dead. I didn't know what to type. But you get the idea. You have not entered a value. What else do I want to do? I want to set its focus. txt car dot set focus. Put the user into that control. Now, I'm not going to change its colour. We're just going to put the cursor there. This is not happening on the OK button. This is happening immediately after changing it. So it's a bit more logical. The user's going to know what's happened, especially as we display a message box. Okay. And then we're gonna exit sub. And that is that. Might just leave it at that. I won't worry about the other 3. It all takes up chunks on these videos. You get the idea. But we can copy that and tweak it for the train, taxi, overnight. I'll do that for the file that I'll supply on this lesson. That will be ready to go. But the purposes of this testing, that will do us the car text box. Let's go back to our spreadsheet. Click our button for a new expense and see what happens. Let's not put a first name in. So this is Minnie Mouse, but I haven't mentioned her name. Sales. Let's ignore the car for a moment and put a train of £20. And let's click OK. Oh no! Somebody's missed out a first name. The cursor is immediately put into that control. That is it set in focus. And it changes colour to red. And clearly it has not gone ahead with its task, which is our exit sub. If I put Minnie in, we are now quite happy. So Minnie Mouse is entered into there, and so is relevant information. As I mentioned before, that'll be okay now. Right, let's press it again to trigger it. And this time I'm going to enter this stuff correctly. I'm running out of things to say. Let's put building in. I have a little kind of repertoire of silly names that I sometimes fall back to. Marketing, let's try it car. But I'm going to make a typo. Y73. Oh, immediately it tells me. Comes like you have not entered a value. I tell you what is a good idea. Is after typing that we clear the cell as well. Notice when we click OK, I've got a backspace to get rid of my mistake. And it warns me straight away. So this is stuff that you can see when you get going with a form. And as you test it out, you think, oh, I don't like that. The fact it's testing it every time it's changed. So we could run it on maybe the exit event. So only when somebody leaves the control will it perform the test. That might be better. And I quite like the idea of clearing the form as well. So that somebody doesn't have to remove the text themselves. They made a mistake, clear it, so you do it again sort of thing. So this is good. I'm going to put a 34 in there to run that through. And it's done. So back into our code, and back into the coding stuff here. We can add this stuff in at our leisure. And please experiment with this. This is what learning VBA is all about. If you've got your own ideas, get stuck in, try it out, read up on it, look at what other events might be better for you and how you want it to behave. In this example, to clear that, we could quite happily just put txt car equals, and I can just put an empty string in there to kind of clear that as one way of clearing it. And bear in mind that on these list of events, there are things like exit, which will happen when somebody leaves that control. So there are different ways that you may decide to approach that. Okay, I'm going to remove that from this, and I'm going to set the other controls ready for this lesson. But that was just looking at a few examples of validating use of form entry to try and ensure it is accurate before we start adding it to the spreadsheet, which is essential. Otherwise, anything else you've got going on, such as charts, pivot tables, conditional formatting rules, they may not function because of it.